Good day, everyone. 'Tis I, the Blue Baron, defender of traditionalism. Fides Traditio Monarchia.
And I'm Wilfred, his red-tailed hawk.
Today we'll be continuing our series of animation antiquities, but this time we're going to be jumping back a bit by looking at the beginnings of Walt Disney Studios, in particular the works of Laugh-O-Gram Studios and later the Alice Comedies.
The what?
I understand your confusion. Let me explain. We're not yet looking at Walt Disney Studios per se. Rather, we are looking back on the animation that Walt Disney created before forming his studio that got him started in the industry to begin with.
Why don't we just skip to Steamboat Willie?
Because, Manfred, I don't believe in doing things halfway. I want people to get the full picture of how animation began and rose to prominence.
Are you sure it's not just you can have this be a 7-part miniseries as opposed to a 5-part one?
I assure you, the fact that my pilot miniseries will happen to have 7 episodes, which incidentally is the number of completion, is simply a happy accident.
Right.
Our story begins in January of 1920 in Kansas City, where Walt Disney had been working as an apprentice artist since October at the Pesman Rubin Commercial Arts Studio, along with fellow artist of iWorks. As Pesman Rubin's revenue declined, both Disney and iWorks were laid off. They started their own business, the short-lived iWorks Disney Commercial Artists. Sadly, it failed to attract many customers, and they both agreed that Disney should leave temporarily to earn money at the Kansas City Film Ad Company, run by A.V. Cogger, and the following month, iWorks, who was not able to run their business alone, also joined. While working for Cogger, Walt Disney became interested in animation, although he preferred drawn cartoons such as Mutt and Jeff and Coco the Clown. With the assistance of a borrowed book on animation and a camera, he began experimenting at home. He came to the conclusion that cell animation was more promising than the cutout animation technique that the studio was currently using. Unfortunately, he was unable to persuade Cogger to try cell animation, so Disney opened a new business with a co-worker from the Film Ad Company, Fred Harmon, which would become Laugh-O-Gram Films. In 1921, Walt Disney was contacted by Milton Feld to animate 12 cartoons, which he called Newman's Laugh-O-Grams, after the local Newman Theater, their main client. On May 23, 1922, when Walt Disney was just 20 years old, Laugh-O-Gram Films was incorporated by Disney using the remaining assets of the defunct iWorks Disney Commercial Artists from local investors. LOGF produced 9 of the requested 12 films with little income resulting. But, encouraged by his short's popularity at the theater, and inspired by Terry Toon's Aesop's Fables, Walt decided he wanted to make his own animated versions of fairy tales too, and invested 6 months in his first attempt at Little Red Riding Hood. Sadly, it was not a large commercial success. It was quickly forgotten and lost sometime after until a British collector discovered a print of it in the London Film Library in 1998, and had it restored that same year. However, despite not being a success either financially or in the public's imagination, the film was important in that it was Walt Disney's first real cartoon, and it introduced the prototype for Julius the Cat, who would become Disney's first named recurring character. But it seemed fortune was to smile upon Walt Disney, as on Sunday, September 16, 1922, Laugh-O-Gram Films sales manager Leslie Mace was staying in New York looking for distributors, and he ended up signing a contract for 6 animated shorts with Pictorial Clubs, Inc., Tennessee. Pictorial wanted educational shorts to show at schools and other non-theatrical venues, and they agreed to pay $11,000 for the cartoons. Unfortunately, there was a catch. Only $100 was paid in advance. The rest of the payment would have to wait until January 1, 1924, when all the shorts had been delivered.
Still, things are looking up.
Well, at least until a few months after the deal was struck, when Pictorial went bankrupt. As you can probably imagine, Laugh-O-Gram Studios never received the rest of the payment. As a result, its financial problems became even more serious, and the staff started leaving. But then something unexpected happened. A local Kansas City dentist, Thomas B. McCrum, from the Diener Dental Institute, contacted Disney and offered him the job of producing a short subject about dental hygiene intended for the Missouri school system. Mr. Disney brought together some of his staff again and made Tommy Tucker's Tooth, which earned the studio $500.
That doesn't seem like much.
Keep in mind, currency has been greatly devalued since then. In 2017 American dollars, the amount Walt Disney and Company received would roughly translate to $7,157.49.
Seriously? Well, then they could pay off their debts then, right?
They could, but they didn't.
What? Why?
Instead of paying off his creditors, the money was invested in the live-action/animation demonstration film Alice's Wonderland, starring the youthful Virginia Davis. Walt had noted how popular the Out of the Inkwell series from the Fleischer Studios was, which had animated characters interacting with the real world. By reversing the gimmick and using a real-life character in a cartoon universe instead, he hoped for a hit. Virginia Davis's contract with Lavagram was signed by her parents on April 23, 1923, with the terms giving her 5% of the Alice's Wonderland films receipt. Hey, that's funny. 5% is exactly what I'm giving you, Manfred.
Hey, I'm gonna be broke and you're gonna be rich.
Looking for a distributor for Alice's Wonderland on May 14th, Disney wrote to Margaret Winkler, a New York film distributor. Alice's Wonderland begins with Alice entering a cartoon studio to witness cartoons being created. Alice is amazed by what she sees. The cartoon characters come to life and play around. After heading to bed that night, she dreams of being in the cartoon world, welcomed by all the characters. Alice plays with them until a group of lions break free from a cage and chase her. Though never released, this short helped set the stage for what was to come in the later Alice comedies, as it established the world as a playful dream, and also introduced the elements which would soon define the series. The idea of setting a real-world girl in an animated world was at this point in film history still unique. The design and voice of the later series were all set by this original film. The biggest problem with this short, as well as the Alice comedies as a whole, is that it doesn't really have much of a plot to it. It's just Alice experiencing one thing after another on a trip through a dreamlike world. However, most people forget that that premise is pretty much the basis of Alice in Wonderland in most of its incarnations. The original material was pretty much the same in that it was meant to be a story of exploration and wonder rather than plot and events. So in that regard, the series is a very faithful representation of the source material. Certainly more so than some. It's true that the animation isn't nearly as natural as Walt Disney's later works, but the beauty of basing something off Wonderland is that you're not limited to what is natural when portraying it. I think it could be said that the animation being so exaggerated is a very good way to emphasize the differences between Wonderland, or Cartoonland as this place seems to be known, and the real world as represented by Alice. Sadly, after completing the film, the studio went bankrupt and was forced to shut down, filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on July of 1923. Disney raised some final money by shooting a 6-month-old girl named Kathleen Viley.
What, you mean you shot a baby? That's terrible!
No, Manfred, I mean shoot as in take a picture of.
Well, to be fair, you didn't phrase it very well.
Fine. Disney raised some final money by working as a freelance photographer, doing a photo shoot of a 6-month-old girl named Kathleen Viley, and then sold his movie camera, which earned him enough money to buy a one-way train ticket to Los Angeles, California, to live with his Uncle Robert and his brother Roy, bringing with him an unfinished reel of Alice's Wonderland. In California, Disney continued to send out proposals for the Alice series, in hopes of obtaining a distribution agreement. A deal was finally arranged through Winkler Pictures, run by Margaret Winkler and her fiancé, Charles Mintz. Because of a recent falling out with Pat Sullivan, which we talked about in our last video, the studio needed a quick replacement for their centerpiece Felix the Cat animated series. Disney then convinced Virginia Davis's family to bring her from Missouri to Los Angeles to star in the series. Walt Disney both directed and produced all 57 films of the Alice comedies. Animation was also done by Walt Disney, sometimes assisted by Roland Hamilton. Over the course of the series, 4 actresses played Alice: Virginia Davis for 15 films, Margie Gay for 31 films, Dawn O'Day for 1 film, and Lois Hardwick for 10 films. However, the film Alice in the Jungle contains only archival footage of Virginia Davis. By 1926, Margaret Winkler's role in the distribution of the Alice series had been handed over to her now husband, the film producer Charles Mintz, although the relationship between him and Disney was sometimes strained. The series ran until July 1927, by which time Disney had begun to tire of it and wanted to move away from the mixed format to all animation. After Mintz requested a new material to distribute through Universal Pictures, Disney and Iwerks would end up creating a new character to be the face of their animation, which we shall look at next time. I'm the Blue Baron, defender of traditionalism. God bless you all, and remember, Fides Traditio Monarchia. We're not yet looking at Walt Disney Studios per se. Rather, we are looking back on the animation that Walt Disney created before forming his studio that got him started in the industry to begin with.
You're listening. Oh yeah, I get bored lying, so longer we go along.